Okay, the sunlight's out today and great time to test the drone. I have the DJI Mini 5 Pro here. As you guys know, since I fly the drone virtually almost every day and with thousands of flights in the other one, the batteries and stuff are just all wearing out. So it was time for an upgrade. And for this one too, the one that I got for the Mini 5 Pro, I actually got the one with the screen built into the controller. So I thought that'd be kind of an interesting test overall, whether or not that will be way more convenient in terms of not having to drag a separate phone to use as the screen and so forth. So I'll run it through some tests and I'll let you know kind of how it's like, I guess, as I'm using it. I did actually set everything up as expected. One interesting note I found was that thing seemed like it was getting extremely hot even though it was idle there. I haven't brought out the thermal camera so you can see where all the heat was coming from. I guess one way to reduce the weight of the drone is to use potentially, I guess, thinner plastic or something like that. I've actually haven't seen the drone emit heat like that anyways on the older ones. I did do all the firmware upgradings and stuff as you would expect, and a note for, I guess, anyone who's new to this, you actually have to update every single battery with the drone as well, so keep that in mind because I know a lot of people, they would just update the firmware and they just assume, okay, it's done just with the one battery. You have to do it for each and every one of them. So today this will be the official, I guess, maiden flight test. I know in a lot of places like the US, this apparently won't be available just with all the geopolitical issues. So if you guys have any questions in terms of what you want me to test out with this, just let me know. I think for shots, I'm just trying to go for some basic stuff just to do some testing. For example, an open area, of course, at first to make sure this thing works. It's sunny, so I should be able to get some basic shots. And a lot of you have been used to what I've been capturing, so you can kind of see whether or not you can see a difference. As well, just trying to get some different lighting. For example, hopefully later on when it gets darker as well, just to see how good it is. Okay, first flight complete. What are my thoughts in general? It seemed like it operated pretty well. You can definitely tell a lot of the images are sharper when I'm capturing it. One thing I did notice with the screen, it's more convenient obviously to have the screen not having to bring up the phone and so forth. One thing I immediately noticed, just because I'm so used to having, let's just say, a separate screen on the phone, normally the screen would be on the top and the controller parts would be on the bottom. Whereas in this one, the sticks and so forth are closer, I guess you could say, to the top and the screen's closer to the bottom. I actually prefer it when you're looking at the screen on the top end anyway. So I don't know if they could have just moved the controllers to the bottom or something like that when you're bringing it up to your face, for example. I think it'll be better, in my opinion, if it was like that. One real positive about this, I think anyways, is the noise when you're actually flying. It's a lot quieter in my opinion, and it has a more pleasant sound, I guess you could say. When you fly it up in the air, you can barely hear this one, so that's really good actually. If you don't want to try to, I guess, draw too much attention or disrupt people, for example, when you're flying a drone. Okay, lights going down as expected. Let's see if I can get to the spot I wanted to go for the next test. One thing I'm missing for this test actually is the proper filters. They actually give you 3 of them in this bundle. For example, you get like an ND8 and so forth. However, I'm missing things like the polarizing filters. That's usually good for water shots, so I'll have to wait a little later when one comes out. Okay, the second test actually went pretty well overall, I thought. It looked pretty good. And when there were situations where the light was really low, for the heck of it, I just went from, for example, the lowest ISO to the highest, just so you can see what it's like. You usually don't want to go too high because if you do, it'll introduce too much noise and the picture is virtually unusable unless you want to post-process it even more, but you generally want to try to get the best raw footage per se as you could initially. Essentially what I was primarily trying to test out is things like dynamic range, for example, with this camera, because there's times where it could be dark and it could be bright in some spots, which I thought during these times anyways, like these golden hours, it's an ideal time to test that, especially here where there's some artificial lights from like the vendors in the buildings, there's a natural light, and again, there's some parts that are just super dark. All right, the final testing site. One thing I did kind of figure out what was going on at first, when I was just using the controller, I'm wondering, why does this stuff keep popping up on the screen, for example? Like the modes are changing in terms of trying to detect certain subjects to focus on. Apparently because of the screen, remember how I said I prefer the screen to be on the top? Well, with the way this is designed, I guess sometimes like a small part of my hand, for example, might be touching like on the side of the screen. For some reason, this screen is registering it on that exact spot where you're activating, for example, like these lock-on modes. So I guess that's another example how it would have been better to have the screen on the top anyways, if that was possible. So what do I think overall in terms of a first impression? It seems like the picture is a lot sharper. That I could tell for sure, and it does, of course, work better in low light. One thing I did notice is the drone does feel a little bigger in terms of the space that it takes up. For example, when you unfold everything, it's not too big of a deal overall, but it just gives you a little less flexibility, I suppose, if you're flying in smaller areas, for example. In terms of a DJI product for me, this was an upgrade from the Mini 2, for example, and I could tell the quality is going to be a lot better as I use this virtually every day, as you guys know, to do a real test overall. So it's not just like a one-day thing saying this is the best ever or the worst ever. You'll see virtually everything in terms of how it performs and so forth in different situations as well. Who knows if I'll need to contact the customer service and so forth, but you'll see the evaluation of that too, if necessary, as usual. And again, with all those geopolitical stuff, I know this isn't available in the US and so forth, so maybe I could just show some footage and stuff as the day goes by, and you can kind of evaluate yourself whether or not you think it's worth it anyways, if you have to go through some extreme trouble to get it. That's about it at the moment. I can't think of anything on top of my head in terms of what I experienced so far. I can see it would be an improvement for a lot of stuff, but I guess we'll see as the days go on. I'll show you the other stuff I captured today too, like the wildlife, and as well, I'll cut a drone video just based on all the footage once I get home and review everything just to see what it's like and so forth. As long as you're gone, when this will pretend I've been dreaming. See you guys later.